seeing as Israel indeed suffered tremendous losses, both on the Palestinian front and on the Lebanese front, do you think they potentially have reached or will soon reach a stage of being unable to literally continue down this path? Because, I mean, we're having reports recently that Israel is resorting to, for example, exploding certain villages in the south of Lebanon. And of course, as everyone knows, they target the civilian buildings. You know, they constantly claim they belong to the Hezbollah members or what have you, but their cause is destruction, like they're destroying the heritage sites. They want to destroy people's homes for the same reasons that you mentioned, so that people can have nowhere to go back to. But there are certain indications that they are being exhausted on a military level when it comes to the people who they need to fight for them. Conscription is failing miserably in Israel, and at the end of the day, you know, they can't have indefinite resources when it comes to weapons. Do you think that is actually playing a part in the talks of a ceasefire, or is it not relevant, and you think the tap will completely be open when it comes to the United States?
Actually, Israel already exhausted its bank of goals. Like, they already had their goals set. Which part are they going to bomb? Where do they think that these missile launchers are? The assassinations among the Hezbollah. The plan was shock and awe, like in Iraq, the pager terrorist attack, the assassinations, and the destruction of Dahieh, the southern suburbs of Beirut. And on the front lines, they had their ground offensive goals, which apparently they aren't able to reach, because what they're basically doing is they're invading certain villages. They cannot really stay there, so they're just coming in, planting explosives and blowing up entire villages and leaving, because staying in these areas is a war of attrition, and it means definitely more losses for the Israeli occupation forces. Up until this moment, they lost around 42 or 45 tanks in southern Lebanon. So we're speaking about, so when we call it a resistance, usually the resistance, I mean, I haven't seen in the recent history any resistance group like Hezbollah. Hezbollah is beyond resistance. Hezbollah has become like an actual army. They have a hierarchy, they have leadership, they have different units, they have special units in it. They have long-range missiles, anti-tank, anti-warships. It's like there is no other group than Hezbollah, a non-state actor, which acquired all these type of weapons in the world. There is none. So basically, if the goal is to push Hezbollah beyond the Litani River, they failed. If the goal was to destroy the rocket and missile launchers on the south of the Litani River, they failed. So if the goals, the ground offensive goals, haven't reached their goals, they have to resort to Plan B. And I don't underestimate Israel's I don't want to call it a geniusness, because it's like, but they're creative, let's say, in criminal mindset, right? Like they don't underestimate what they could plan for the Lebanese, especially that the major goal for forcing the grassroots, the supporters of Hezbollah, to leave their villages, as you mentioned, they're bombing the civilian infrastructure, civilian homes, or Dahieh, is because they wanted for these hundreds of thousands of Hezbollah community, or the Shia community between quotations, to be displaced in other areas where they could come in the media outlets now, which are, they are doing 24/7 on Saudi-funded TVs, and Emirati-funded TVs, and American-funded TVs speaking in Arabic, that this is a Shia invasion in other regions in Lebanon. This is how they are portraying it. So if there is one person who is seedless in his brain, and it caused some problems with the people who are displaced now there, this is the bet. This is what they want. They want for such contacts to happen and to exaggerate it, and they want to start a turmoil in the country. So in this case, I see that the talks of a ceasefire could be, of course, again, for electoral reasons now that the Biden administration is finished and we are going to have a new president in the US. And I think that I could be wrong, but it seems that if there is no wide-scale fraud in the elections, Trump will be the next president in the US. And under Trump, the Zionist evangelicals and the Zionist supporters of Trump and the Zionist members of his administration, they're going to push him hard to quote unquote finish the job in the region. And remember that the Biden administration is not in good terms with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but Trump. He has a very good relationship with these two countries. So we could see a return or U-turn from Saudi Arabia, which is now saying that I don't want to normalize ties with Israel until we find a solution for the Palestinian cause. But if Trump comes to power, we could see different calculations. Now, so we have ceasefire probably for electoral reasons, ceasefire probably for as a smokescreen to prepare for social instability. You mentioned the U.S. ambassador, and you said that she's visiting people. Habibi, they come to her feet. They go to her feet. They go to her feet, and this. And it's not something that a conspiracy is something we don't know. They post their photos with the U.S. ambassador on social media platforms. Yeah. Famous journalists, famous politicians, NGO activists, human rights, feminism, all these cliches that you know. They all have their activists in Lebanon and big social media platforms, and they're spewing hate against Hezbollah day and night. So it's like the fifth column eating the strength of Hezbollah from within by trying to destabilize the internal situation. It's a very unfortunate situation. This is something that you don't see much in Israel, for example. The enemies of Israel cannot really come and open an embassy and start hiring people in Tel Aviv to turn them against Netanyahu or anyone else. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, but the Americans feel they are immune from these activities.
Anwar Abu Bakr here is mentioning, thank you, Anwar, for your participation. Trump met with Muslim leaders in Michigan and promised peace. Forbes has a video of their YouTube channel. This is something that I addressed a couple of days ago. Do you mind elaborating, Kevork? Do you have a take on Trump meeting with Muslim leaders and some of them endorsing Donald Trump?
I mean, everyone is free. I don't want to come and judge people for their electoral choices, but I want to say something. What's the definition of peace in the mind of Donald Trump? We know what is it. He wants to force the Arabic countries to sign this surrender deal with Israel. A deal like the UAE, a deal like Bahrain, a deal like Morocco, and a deal like Jordan and Egypt. And you see all these countries, they cannot act when strategic conflicts hit the region. They become paralyzed, they become committed on a security level, financially. I mean, the entire Camp David Accords of Egypt was based on a few $1 billion per year aid package to Egypt. And until this moment, Egypt cannot really sustain its economic instability. And you see the inflation is there's hyperinflation now in Egypt. The economy is in ruins. They have loans from the IMF. So if they don't occupy you militarily, they will come economically, financially. They have financial assassins, right, to paralyze your country. So if in Trump's mind, he thinks, so this is also his grassroots belief that he wants to bring peace with strength. Something like he assassinates the former Al-Quds commander Soleimani, that he would think that through such actions he could force his enemies into submission and coming to a negotiation table. This is an information I want to reveal to you because I know it for a fact, and I know it by sources, not like any reports. So Trump was engaged in negotiations with Assad, right? He came to power.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, of course. He stopped the regime change war, And he said, this is very costly for us. We're spending billions in Syria, and the arms are going in the hands of his Al-Qaeda types. I want to finish it. So Mike Pompeo signed this, the end of the regime change war, which was a covert operation under the title Timber Sycamore of the CIA. So he ended it. But he wanted a few things from Assad. So he started negotiating with him through Oman. And while he was negotiating through Oman, few things happened. Like because there are elements in the deep state in the US, they rejected these negotiations with Assad, and Trump wanted to withdraw the forces from Syria, so they wanted to sabotage it. So in 2018, this alleged chemical attack happened in Douma in August 2018, which there wasn't any chemical attack. Up until this moment, there is no chemical attack there, but then the US, France, and the UK, they accused Assad of using chemical weapons and forced Trump to bomb Syria, right? So he needed to appease the neocons in his administration and bomb Syria. And then he said that he's going to assassinate Assad. See, he wanted to force Assad into negotiation and submission through these threats, like I will assassinate you, like I did with Soleimani. You know, this is the way that Trump wants to intimidate the region into signing these Abraham Accords and bring peace. Peace in his mind means there is no Palestine, Israel, and it has peace deals with Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. This is his vision of peace. So if the Muslim community in the US believe that this is the solution, then Habibi, go and vote for Donald Trump. You know, like if I was an American, Trump's internal things that he's saying is attractive. Of course, he's more attractive than Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a complete idiot. Sorry, she is not fit for a president. But Trump, he looks attractive for the American voter.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes certain people can be a little bit short-sighted when it comes to that, in particular, due to the fact that when they are speaking about Trump or Harris in terms of foreign policy, they're asking who's going to stop the war, right? And we have two people who have a track record of supporting Israel. I mean, Trump, when he was in power, he did many things to the favor of Israel. He recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli territories. He moved the US embassy to Jerusalem, something that Bush hasn't done, that Obama hasn't done. Yeah. And now he's promising the world to the Zionist donors. Yet somehow, they think that taking a few pictures with certain, leaders from the Muslim community can all of a sudden change everything. And I think it's a problem that lies within the observers more than it does with the people themselves, because every politician wants to get votes, and they'll promise the world before they go in, and then afterwards, well, you elected them and you have no say after that. I mean, we have something that is further away from genuine, true democracy and more of an elected dictatorship, what we have at the moment, not democracy in a true essence. I wanted to also get your opinion about the latest declaration coming from the Russian foreign minister, that we will soon see a declaration coming from Iran and Russia about something to do with strategic partnership. Mm-hmm. Now, they already, both Russia and Iran, have shown tremendous levels of strategic partnership. They nurtured their relationships very well in the past decade. We're seeing a relationship that is increasingly getting stronger. They had certain differences in opinion, but which countries don't have any differences in opinion? But I'd say the levels of coordination are sky high and better than ever before. Yes. When it comes to these two countries, we've seen Iran supporting Russia. We've seen Russia supporting Iran. We've seen Ilyushins landing in Iran before any potential Israeli attack, or in preparation to prep up Iran's self-defense systems. We've heard reports about Su-35s. and a lot of logistic and military support, and also political and diplomatic support. That also expands to China, but at the moment, what I wanted to talk to you about is Russia. So if we already have all of this visible strategic partnership with them already, with arms, with defense, with cover, increased coordination in the region to a level where many people believe that Russia will actually intervene in case Iran gets hit in a bad manner, not just like a back and forth blow with them in Israel. Could we see a defense pact between the two countries, or what is it, in your opinion, that declaration would include in the near future?
Actually, it's a defense pact, and they have been negotiating this for quite some time. But let's go like 20 years just back and see and compare the relationship of Russia and Iran with 2024. I believe this was 2005 or 2006 when Iran declared new levels of enriching uranium, and the US presented a list of sanctions against Iran in the UN Security Council. Russia, if I'm not mistaken, Russia abstained. So this was like 25 years ago, right? And Iran's president back then, he said Russia has helped the enemy. Like the relationships between Iran and Russia, despite that both shared similar enemies in the past, but Russia was more flexible than Iran in dealing with the US. They wanted to become part of the Western world. They wanted to become good partners with the European Union, with Germany, etc. But things slowly shift due to the US insistence on a zero-sum game approach in the world. When Iran is rising as a regional power and asking for more influence and leverage in the region, and when Russia is rising from the status of an above regional power into the status of a superpower and asking for more roles and tasks on the international scene, and when they see the American approach that is zero-sum game, I'm the dominant and you guys follow the dictates, then they have to find new approaches among each other. So in this case, the Russian and Iranian close military security cooperation also started in Syria in 2015. It was Soleimani who went to Moscow after Syria asked Russia to intervene in the conflict. Soleimani went and met with Putin, and he explained the situation and what could be the role of Russia and what could be the role of Iran in destroying these terrorist groups. So from there, you see that joint operations create mutual understanding and cooperation and trust, and things start to develop between these two countries because there was no axis where Iran and Russia are together in the same axis. They have their different paths. But after the Ukraine war, Russia realized that the relationship with the West will never work. Under Putin and under the current mindset in Russia, there is no way possible to trust the West any longer. So they have to do drastic changes in their strategic approach. And that is how they opened up completely to China, North Korea, and now with Iran. And this is the wise approach, in my opinion, because Eurasia is the most important region in the world. And whoever controls or has upper hand over Eurasia will control the most of the natural resources and the geopolitical might in the world. And you see the three legs of Eurasia are Russia, China, and Iran. So closer relationship between them is definitely a task that they have tasked themselves, let's say, to achieve a multipolar world. And Iran sees itself as an important player in this. And that is why in the current conflict in Ukraine, you see that Iran is supplying Russia with hundreds, probably thousands of kamikaze drones, right? And they had a detrimental impact on the outcome of the hostilities in Ukraine. And similarly now, when there was a threat against Iran, Russia accelerated its weapon supplies in terms of the defense systems, air defense systems, to Iran. And when I was reading an article in The Hill, which is completely crap and just put everything in the trash because they're quoting the intelligence community of the US, which lied everybody in everything else, but this time they're telling us the truth that Israel destroyed the S-300s and S-400s of Iran. Now they don't have any air defense systems, right? So they're exposed. So this should be the prelude, the pre-phase for another wave of attacks by Israel against Iran. If that was the case, I think there would have been a phase two hours after the first phase, not waiting for a week or two. Like these people sell us really bullocks, and they want us to believe. Anyways, but in this article, it mentions that the S-300s and 400s were present on the Iranian soil. Now, I was watching the former MI6 officer Alistair Crook, and he mentioned an information. So this, I'm just paraphrasing him. So this is his information, that the Israelis, they had a multiple plan of multiple phases of attacks against Iran. And the first phase was with the fighter jets. So they fly 70 kilometers away from Iran. They don't come anywhere close to the regional waters, 70 kilometers away from the Iranian territories. And they try to destroy the batteries, the air defenses. And they were surprised and shocked with the competence of the Iranian air defenses and new systems that the Israelis were not aware of. So in this case, the phase 2 and phase 3 didn't come to materialize. But in this case, you see the Russian support to Iran was also detrimental. It was very important between these sides. So this increasing level of partnership between both sides, it's only a matter of time for them to sign a defensive pact, just like Russia signed similar one with North Korea. If North Korea comes under attack, Russia will come in support, and vice versa. So this explains so legally speaking now, I don't have any evidence to support this because I haven't seen any material or video. But legally now, Russia can invite North Korean soldiers under this defense pact to fight in Kursk, because Kursk is a Russian territory.
That is absolutely correct. What you're saying is absolutely correct. And that's why we're hearing these reports, because with the defense pact, that's the next stage. The country is totally, can totally participate in any act of aggression that is being conducted on the other country that it has a defense pact with. Therefore, there's nothing surprising about it because it is a defense pact. Now, with regards to the prospect of such a defense pact between Russia and Iran, is that an estimate, or are there sources to provide us with more evidence that it is what's going to be declared? Because when I spoke about it a couple of days ago, I mean, this was the natural progression in terms of my understanding of the situation, but I had no evidence to support the fact that they will indeed be having a defense pact. Do you have any sources on that, or is it just like another estimation from you based on the regular progress that we're seeing between the two countries?
So I don't want to make any statements that could be wrong, but I'm 100% sure that I have read on a Russian state website, this was a few months ago, that it is going to be a defense pact. This is something that I'm sure 100% read it on a Russian state outlet. However, I'm not going to say that this is what is going to happen now in the near future. It's a speculation, but it is based on a report that I have read. So this started under the former president of Iran, and there is a guidance from the supreme leader to continue this approach. Now, I just want to make one more point, Mahmoud, in this case. Today, I watched a statement for the permanent envoy of Russia to the UN, and he said, I'm paraphrasing him, that any ideas to freeze the Ukraine war will be unacceptable, and they're not going to freeze the conflict. Now, there is a theory, call it a conspiracy theory, that there are elements in the deep state in the US, they realize that the project Ukraine is not going well. And the front lines in eastern Ukraine have completely crumbled. You just have to check the map of control 5 months back and 5 months now, and you will see the progress of the Russian forces. So they know that the end goal, which was kicking the Russian forces out, restoring the Donbas region, Novorossiya and Crimea, is not going to happen. And Ukraine has to sign on some sort of deal with Russia at the end of the day. And before it is too late, these elements in the deep state believe that they have to achieve a victory, quote unquote victory, in a place where they think they can achieve a victory, and this time is in the Middle East. So if you see that there is this approach by the Trump people who support Trump and his advisors who say, we want to stop the war in Ukraine, we don't want to send any penny to Ukraine, this and that. But at the same time, none of them says anything about these weapon supplies to Israel. They want to stop the war or freeze, let's say, the war in Ukraine to focus on the Middle East, where they think probably it's possible for them to achieve a victory, but this time against Iran. And this is, in my opinion, where things are headed towards. That's why the Russian and the Iranian pact will come into fruition if such a scenario would be possible, let's say, in the US, that Trump wants to focus on the Middle East. Because for Russia, it is impossible for them to lose Iran as a partner in the region. It is an essential part of the multipolar world. Iran is an essential part also in the BRICS Plus. China will not allow for the US to destroy or occupy or regime change in Iran. Iran is the biggest exporter of oil to China. And similarly, Iran also is on the road, Silk and Road Initiative road. They're not going to sacrifice their investments in the past decades for the sake of the US in its last phase of its empire lifespan to come and achieve a decisive victory in the Middle East. They will come in support of Iran if there is an existential threat posed on Iran. I believe that before we reach to that point, Iran will definitely, if that scenario is going to be materialized and the Americans are going to come after Iran in the region, Iran will change its nuclear doctrine. There is no question about that. And there would be a new fatwa allowing it for deterrence reasons. And this time the Americans will not be able to attack Iran. I read an article for Scott Ritter the other day, and he explains in details how Iran can build tactical nuclear weapons in a very, very short time. They are weeks away from it if they want to. So there are increasing voices in Iran calling on the supreme leader to issue a fatwa, because this tit for tat between Iran and Israel, it's like a snowball effect. You see how it started and where it's headed. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised that Iran is determined on this time to retaliate again, because the attack was complete failure for the Israelis. But probably there are also people now in Iran whispering in the ears of the supreme leader that if Israel was incapable of achieving or managing to destroy our defensive capabilities in such a way, then we have to capitalize on the weakness of the enemy and move from the defensive into the offensive this time, right? Because this is the criticism directed at Iran in the region. And let's be honest, there are people in Hezbollah believe, or the supporters of Hezbollah believe, that Iran has to do more. And they are, when the foreign minister of Iran was in Damascus, he heard from Assad that this is not only our war. This is a war of an axis. And Iran, I mean, we are being hit. Gaza is destroyed, and they're destroying Lebanon, and they're threatening to come to Syria, right? So there should be increasing actions, let's say offensive actions by Iran from the point of view of Damascus and some people in Hezbollah to rebalance this conflict against, let's say, Israel this time. So this could be an opportunity for Iran to showcase its strength once again and achieve absolute deterrence against Israel. I think Israel has to be humbled at some point, and there is no other power which can do that than Iran.
Apart from Iran, and Iran is the only one who is acting on that in the form of an official state, because when we talk about all of the other axis of resistance or alliance of resistance, you're talking about movements or governments who have a challenging or opposing government that is recognized by the US empire and its proxies, or the people who are serving the US empire. I mean, when it comes to the nuclear program of Iran, well, reports in Israel used to say from 2 decades ago that Iran was just a few weeks away from a nuclear bomb if they wanted to do it. And there are many questions as to, well, they could have a secret one, they could have a nuclear bomb from a very long time ago as well. And we also heard reports that they could have a potential nuclear bomb at their disposal if they need such a nuclear bomb. And when we had these meetings from Shoigu going to Iran, they came after meetings he had with North Korea, which is another country that possesses nuclear weapons, and again operates to a very large extent with the blessing of China. I call them the acts of China in the world. Whenever China wants to do something, they'll ask North Korea to do it, and do it on their behalf, and for them to remain in the background. Now, when it comes to the response, I mean, this was the final thing that I wanted to finish off with you. After Israel had this failed attack, if you want to measure it by total military success, well, most of the attacks were conducted out of Iranian airspace. They were petrified to reach Iranian territory. They clearly had potentially some info about Iran's air defense systems, but they did not expect them to be that advanced. We visibly saw the interception coming from Iran. And of course, when it comes to Israel and the mainstream media that, of course, spreads the propaganda in favor of Israel, they would want to portray it as something significant. Now, Iran admitted, and I think the most accurate description when it comes to the attack on Iran came from the supreme leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who said we shouldn't give it too much credit, but we also should not undermine it. However, I personally noted the shift in the tone coming from Iran. Firstly, at a personal level, I was surprised that they even attacked Israel directly back in April. I, at the time, estimated that they would do so through some of the resistance movements in the region, but they, against all odds, went and did it themselves directly. And then, of course, we had the attack in October that was more fierce, more accurate, more heavy, with more missiles landing, more devastation and more fear in the genocide entity. In the beginning days after the recent Israeli attack on Iran, and I mean, I can understand the first couple of days, they would be days of absorption, knowing what happened exactly, analyzing the damage, to which extent did they reach, what did they exactly destroy or not destroy, and then, of course, base a response following that. However, the initial statements that came from Iran were, we reserve the right to respond in the right time and the right place, and we have the right within international law to respond against Israel. However, as the days went by, we're hearing a more escalatory tone or more clear verification and confirmation that no, the attack is coming, it's imminent, and it's also going to be destructive against Israel because we have to respond. Do you think that they left a few days to try and use anything when it comes to a leverage, when it comes to the ceasefire, and potentially try and impose it? Or do you think that it was simply a matter of them actually absorbing what happened, but then deciding to escalate the tone because they are indeed about to have a large response against Israel?
Actually, I followed Marandi in this case, and I wanted to know what could be the perspective from Iran. And it seems that the perspective in Iran is that these attacks by Israel, despite it was complicated and sophisticated and it had multi-layered and multi-spheres, however, they managed to repel the vast majority of these attacks. And this, from their perspective, could be a sign of weakness, as I mentioned, for Israel. And also, there are different factors in the region. Saudi Arabia rejected to help the US and Israel in this case, and they said the airspace is closed, we don't allow attacks. And the second day they condemned officially by the foreign ministry level the attacks on Iran. So they had few factors in the region, or few players in the region, which were traditionally on the side of Israel or the US in such attacks. But this time the Biden administration has exerted maximum pressure on the Benjamin Netanyahu to not hit, for example, the oil facilities and the nuclear reactors, etc. I think the Americans also, first, they are not ready yet for such a war, and secondly, it's a transitional period for them. So this talk of a ceasefire is only for the time to pass. For the time to pass, for the new administration to come to the US, for things to be clear where the foreign policy priorities lie of the US. Because there is this disagreement, let's say. Some people say Israel is leading the US foreign policy. Others say US is using Israel as a tool. I'm leaning more now into the perception that the US has enormous leverage over Israel. And if they want to use it, like this time they did, they could prevent Israel from taking a sort of an action that could lead all of a sudden into an all-out war in the region. And this was confirmed by this so-called intelligence community in the US, which were very critical of the Biden administration for putting such pressure on Netanyahu. And they now say that there has to be phase 2 and phase 3 in order to decapitate the leadership of Iran and replace him with the Shah. And all of a sudden, you see this the son of the former royal king of Iran, Pahlavi. All of a sudden, he came back. He came back to the screens, and he speaks English now. I don't know who
calling to release the Israeli prisoners of war.
He's talking in English. I don't know who is his audience, and why isn't he talking in Persian if his talk is directed to the Iranian people? Anyways, my point is the Israelis would like to go into further escalation and bring the Americans on their side, but were it not for the American weapons, Israel cannot fight. And were it not for the American air defenses that they recently, the THAAD and the other missile systems, Israel proved to be completely exposed to the Iranian missile systems. I mean, they claimed that 97% of the missiles were intercepted. I mean, my eyes were able to detect like 97 missiles falling from the skies on Israel. I don't know how do they make these calculations and absurd claims. So Israel is vulnerable. I think that Iran sees this now, and they take this opportunity as because they have now an excuse to retaliate after they're being attacked, to impose new calculations on Israel. For example, force them to stop the war in Gaza or force them to stop the war in Lebanon. There has to be a certain major accomplishment for the Iranians to not retaliate against Israel, right? But the ceasefire agreement in Gaza is impossible, in my opinion. Israelis are determined to exterminate the Palestinians. I'm not saying they will or they can. I'm just saying that still in their mind, they're determined on exterminating the Palestinians. And this is the evidence, and the proof of it is what's happening in northern Gaza. Despite the absence of acts of hostilities between both sides, there is a military order not to allow the people to come back, and those who are coming back are being targeted, harassed, detained, humiliated, subjugated. You see? So when there is this article in the Haaretz says, when it looks like an ethnic cleansing, maybe it's an ethnic cleansing. And there is a consensus about it nowadays, right? So Israel is not interested in a ceasefire in Gaza, and the Lebanese side will not stop firing on them until there is stop of the genocide in the Gaza Strip. But Israel has raised the bar of so high, like it's no longer, I don't see there is any middle ground in this. This war is going to continue, and it could get uglier in the day. But the time that we can stop the war and go back to the two-state solution negotiations are over. There is not going to be a two-state. There is not going to be a one Zionist state occupying all Palestine. No, that's not going to happen. It will take time, and Israel will continue in its self-suicidal mission. And you see it looks like a dinosaur when a meteor hit the Earth, and it feels that it is demising, and will take everyone with them, in this. And it feels like the only thing that is still keeps Israel relevant is the bloodshed. Like once the bloodshed stops and the shock factor revives in the Israeli society, what happened and what they have done and what type of heinous crimes their army has committed, it will be a chilling moment. There will be a chilling moment. And the people, if you think that the people will just forget what happened in Gaza, it's impossible. It's impossible to forget what happened in Gaza. And the people will not stop the pressure in all the organizations, whether it's international, whether it is local. There is going to be a time when Israel realizes that it cannot continue as a Zionist state, supremacist state over the rest. And this is going to be the time, in my opinion, for international powers like China and Russia to impose themselves as peacemakers in the region, because Americans are not mediators. They cannot. And when I say peacemakers, I mean real peacemakers, not the Trump peace. They have to restore the territories to who it belongs. And the Jewish people who were indigenous here, they would like to stay. Ahlan wa sahlan. Of course, they have to stay because they're part of this territory. And those who came after as settlers and they still think that they probably would like to have some privileges, those people have the choice. But those who want to be treated equally, I think that there has to be a moment of hard reconciliation, otherwise this bloodshed will continue for another 100 years. And I know that's very difficult for a mother who lost a son. I know that's very difficult for a child who lost his parents in Palestine, but there has to be an authority imposing certain level of stability and peace at the end of the day. Continuation of this bloodshed in the region, we also deserve to be developed, right, in our region. And they just keep this circle of violence for their hegemonic aspirations. And the time has come. I think that there will be a time when China and Russia will seize the opportunity and come to the region. And just like China intervened between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there has to be a third party power to do this, not the US.